Harris, and I am the commanding officer of the starship Aurora, a vessel designed for long-term cryogenic travel through the vastness of the galaxy. Our mission was to explore the furthest reaches of uncharted space, venturing where no one had gone before. Little did we know that our journey would transform into a waking nightmare beyond the realms of human comprehension. As the ship's systems initiated the awakening process, I expected to be met by the drowsy faces of my crew emerging from their cryopods. Instead, I found myself alone in the dimly lit cryo chamber. Panic gripped me as I stumbled over to the nearest pod, its display ominously showing error. My mind raced, grappling with the horrifying realization that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The corridors echoed with a hollow silence as I navigated the desolate ship. Emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. My attempts to hail the crew through the communication systems yielded only static. The once familiar hum of the ship felt alien, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted in our absence. The first signs of the horrors that awaited us manifested in the mess hall. Empty chairs surrounded tables set for meals that never happened. Abandoned trays of dehydrated food lay untouched, a macabre tableau frozen in time. As I ventured deeper, the ship's eerie silence gave way to faint whispers, disembodied echoes that seemed to resonate from the walls themselves. The control room offered no solace. Monitors displayed the desolate expanse of space, devoid of celestial bodies or any familiar markers. The navigational logs were missing, leaving us adrift in an uncharted region of the galaxy. The sense of isolation intensified, and a chill ran down my spine as I wondered how we had ended up in this forsaken abyss. The discovery of the crew quarters plunged me into a realm of horror beyond imagination. The once familiar bunks and personal effects now seemed like relics of a bygone era. And then I stumbled upon the first crew member, Lieutenant Rachel Cole. Her eyes, wide open and vacant, stared into the abyss. Cold sweat formed on my brow as I recognized the unmistakable signs of death by cryo-exhaustion. It didn't take long to realize that every crew member suffered the same fate. The cryopods, designed to sustain life for centuries, had malfunctioned, leaving my team in a state of suspended animation that transformed into an eternal, isolated nightmare. I stood in the midst of the dead, my breath catching in my throat as the weight of their fate pressed down upon me. As I moved through the lifeless corridors, I sensed a subtle shift in the air, a malevolent presence that seemed to slither through the shadows. The whispers grew louder, morphing into tortured murmurs that seemed to resonate from the very walls. It was as if the ship itself bore witness to the horror that had unfolded within its cold metal embrace. The Cryo Nightmare had warped the minds of my crew. In the isolation of their malfunctioning pods, they had become prisoners of their own consciousness, lost in the labyrinth of their darkest fears. The ship, now a haunted vessel adrift in the cosmic void, bore witness to the psychological unraveling of those who once sailed its halls. The first encounter with a twisted remnant of my crew occurred in the engineering bay. Engineer Marcus Rodriguez, once a steady hand at the ship's controls, now moved with a disjointed and unnatural gait. His eyes, vacant and void of recognition, met mine with a chilling gaze. Without warning, he lunged at me, his movements fueled by a primal instinct that defied reason. I narrowly evaded his grasp, stumbling backward in horror. The once familiar face of a colleague now contorted into a grotesque mask of madness. The ship, a sanctuary turned into a twisted nightmare, resonated with Marcus's guttural cries as I fled the scene, my mind grappling with the reality of the horrors that lurked within. As I delved deeper into the ship's recesses, each corridor became a gauntlet of terror. Shadows moved with a life of their own, and the air seemed to ripple with an otherworldly energy. The whispers grew into anguished screams, and I realized that the ship had become a manifestation of my crew's fractured psyches, a living testament to the nightmares that festered within. In the mess hall, I encountered Lieutenant Rachel Cole, the lifeless form I had discovered earlier. Only now she stood before me, her eyes alight with a malevolent glow. The reality of the Cryo Nightmare became chillingly apparent. The crew, driven to madness by centuries of isolation and despair, had become phantoms haunting the very vessel that had promised them an odyssey through the stars. The encounters grew increasingly surreal and terrifying. Dr. Richard Lewis, the ship's medic, now roamed the medical bay in a state of perpetual agony. His ghostly apparition, once a healer, now exuded a malevolent energy that seemed to feed on the anguish that permeated the air. With each encounter, the ship's layout morphed and shifted, mirroring the fractured psyches of the crew. Reality itself seemed to warp, and the Cryo Nightmare revealed its true nature, a descent into a surreal realm where the boundaries of time and space crumbled. In the captain's quarters, I faced the distorted specter of myself, an entity that mirrored my own fears and regrets. Its whispers echoed with fragments of memories and aspirations, taunting me with the reflection of a life left behind in the frozen void of space. I stood before my doppelganger, a manifestation of the darkness that lurked within my own subconscious. As the ship became a nightmarish labyrinth, I grappled with the realization that my crew, once comrades on a journey of exploration, had become vengeful apparitions. The Cryo Nightmare had twisted their souls, trapping them in a purgatory of their own making. The ship, a vessel of dreams turned into a vessel of nightmares, bore witness to the psychological decay of those who had once ventured into the cosmic unknown. In a climactic confrontation in the control room, the remnants of my crew converged, their ghostly forms coalescing into a collective entity fueled by centuries of rage and despair. The very fabric of the ship seemed to pulse with their tormented energy as they sought retribution for the eternity of isolation they had endured. I stood alone against the onslaught of vengeful spirits, the air thick with the weight of their collective consciousness. As the Cryo Nightmare reached its zenith, the ship itself seemed to groan in protest, a vessel pushed beyond the limits of its design. The walls pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and I felt the tendrils of madness wrapping around my mind. In a desperate bid for survival, I initiated the ship's emergency shutdown protocols. Alarms blared, and the very foundations of the vessel quaked as the Cryo Nightmare fought against its inevitable demise. The collective entity, a swirling maelstrom of spectral forms, wailed in protest as the ship's systems powered down. As the emergency lights dimmed, I found myself standing in the silent void of the control room. The ship, once haunted by the twisted remnants of my crew, now stood as a lifeless hulk adrift in the cosmic abyss. The Cryo Nightmare, a descent into the darkest corners of the human psyche, had come to an end. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant hum of the ship's dormant systems. I stood alone in the wreckage of dreams, surrounded by the remnants of a once vibrant crew. The Cryo Nightmare, a harrowing odyssey through the twisted corridors of the human mind, had left an indelible mark on the ship and on my soul. As I prepared to leave the desolate vessel, I couldn't shake the haunting whispers that lingered in the empty corridors. The Cryo Nightmare had exposed the fragility of the human psyche, a vulnerability laid bare in the unforgiving expanse of space. The ship, now a tomb of broken dreams, drifted through the cosmic void, carrying with it the echoes of a journey that had unraveled into madness.